ahead.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out to join us for this training session. Today we'll be looking at two crops, plants, as they may be, that is grown in Jamaica, both in backyard gardening and in commercial operations, and that persons throughout the island have been deriving significant economical benefits out of it in terms of money earned from selling plants, flowers, etc. I am Dennis Leckie, Product Development Agronomist for the Northeast region. And today we're starting out with growing orchids with Chem plant. So basically what we'll be doing is doing a quick introduction or overview of orchids, look at the basic orchid culture, pests and diseases, the treatments of these pests and diseases, the nutritional requirements, and some troubleshooting issues such with issues like bud loss. Because for orchids, the reason why a farmer grows it is for those big beautiful buds that open out into large beautiful blossoms. So having bud loss, once you have done all the hard work to get the plants to actually spike, is always a disappointment for the growers, whether it be homeowners or commercially grown orchids. So Orchidaceae is a large family of flowering plants that are often colorful and fragrant. In Jamaica, we grow them both in backyard gardens and commercially, and they are sold as whole plants or floral arrangements. Now, some of the more common types that you might see in Jamaica would be like the dendrobiums, the vandas, so like the sun vandas, and phalaenopsis. But we have many more types grown in Jamaica, but these are some of the more popular ones that you might encounter on a daily basis. In your floral shops, in your bouquets, you might see dendrobiums, some vandas, and those kinds commonly in your floral arrangements. But there are other exotic types that are also grown in Jamaica, and you might encounter those from time to time. So some basic orchid culture. In growing or cultivating orchids, there are some special attention that must be paid when it comes to your environmental factors, because orchids tend to be very delicate plants when it comes to the effects of the environmental factors that they can have on them. So for example, your lighting, you need just enough to ensure that the leaves do not burn. So even if you're growing the plants outdoors, it's advised that you cover them, use shade cloth to help break some of the sunlight. You have some like the sun vandas and others that won't mind a lot of sun, but there are other orchid types that once they get too much sun, they will show signs of sunburn quite easily. And sunburn, in terms of the lighting, can occur with just about 2-3 hours of intense sun on the leaves of the plant, and you can see the effects of the burn. Now, if you're growing or you've gotten the plant, for example, as a gift and you want to put it in your house, any southeast to east window would be the ideal place to put that orchid for the ideal amount of sun. So you wouldn't want all day sun, just the early morning to just about 10-11 o'clock. That would be good for it. In terms of watering, there's no real recommendations to the quantity of water that you must put on, but what you do is based on the type of potting media that is used for your orchids and the environmental conditions that are prevailing. So if it is very hot and dry, you would need to water more. If it's very humid, you might water a bit less. But one of the major things that we want you to do is ensure that you avoid overwatering, because overwatering will lead to other issues such as your fungal problems, your root rotting, or you might even see your plants start, the leaves of the orchid start to look very turgid, so they look very wet, and when you feel them they feel spongy, and that excess water can actually kill the plant, cause it to just rot out and die. In terms of air, or the air quality, you need good ventilation is key. So you can't lock it in a bedroom with the windows closed and expect that it will perform. Chances are you're going to end up with high humidity conditions, and that is a no-no for orchids. And if it is that you have it indoor, an overhead ceiling fan or even a standing fan, the standing fan not blowing directly on the orchid, the ceiling fan lightly circulating the air would be just good enough for them. Because a common misconception that a lot of persons make with growing orchids, we say because they are tropical type plants, and they grow in forests, and we say forests, high humidity, not much sunlight, etc. Orchids have actually, based on how they are evolved as epiphytes, they actually strive to be higher in the trees, and being higher in the trees they actually get better air circulation, better lighting, etc. From being on the higher elevation in the trees. In terms of feeding, uh, we recommend you feed based on the plant's growth stage. So we would recommend you to use, for example, a fertilizer that is high in nitrogen, especially on an older plant that is flowering, because at that stage the plant would have utilized more potassium and even phosphorus. We recommend feeding 1 to 2 times per week. You can stretch it to once a week if needs be, but ensure that your feeding is done consistently based on the developmental stage of the orchid, to ensure that you get the right type of production, the right development and flooring and etc. out of it. Another important thing as well, urea-based nitrogen fertilizers are a no-no for orchids, because you need the soil microorganisms, which would not tend not to be available in the orchid potting media, to help convert it to usable nitrogen for the orchids. So with that issue, the urea fertilizers would basically be not of any great use to the plant itself. In terms of your potting media, ensure that for most orchids grown in Jamaica, so your vandas, your dendrobiums, etc., a mix of peat moss, gravel, charcoal in a pot would be ideal for them, with even some coconut coir, which would help to hold some of the moisture whenever you water the plants. All right, so we're jumping into now what would be some of the pests of orchids. And this one is the orchid blossom midge, which is for a number of commercial operators in Jamaica. This is a pest that has become and is becoming a severe problem. And what they actually do is that the larvae itself, which are very small, about 2.5 to 3 millimeters in length, they feed on the bud itself and eventually even the blossom once it has opened. You will see to the image to the left would be the active midge feeding on the bud itself, and how they get there would be due to the adults, which the adult midge, which sometimes they emerge in the evenings mainly, and a lot of people you might mistake them for mosquitoes when they are flying around in the evening. But the female lays the egg mass on the open tips of the flower buds, and the larvae hatch from the mass and enter the bud and start feeding from the inside out. So what you'll actually see is so the buds on your right that you see, you'd see what would might look like a healthy bud, but then you start to notice some holes might appear in the bud. After watering or after rainfall, you might see the bud start to turn brown, because what they have done is eaten out the bud and cause it to become uh, 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 easily penetrated by water, and then the water would soak it, and then you definitely would see that yes, they were in there feeding. But as many as 30 larvae can be found in one bud, and currently some of the work that we as AgChem have been doing with treating the orchid blossom midge, we have found where you have had plants with 20 plus um, 20 plus larvae in one bud. So it can be a very difficult pest to treat. Another important thing about them as well is that they once they are matured and finish feeding on the bud, they will actually eat their way out of the bud and then flip off the bud into the soil, where they would pupate until they're ready to emerge as adults. And in terms of flipping, I have seen a midge flip about 8 inches in one go. So I had it on a piece of regular sized composition paper, and it flipped directly off of the paper um, in just one go. And what they do is actually they contract the body and then flip out and dive off into the soil where they would pupate. Another pest that you might encounter would be aphids. And one of the things that is common with aphids, and like another pest we'll look at shortly, the mealybugs, is that you'll tend to see ants working with them. And ants themselves don't do any damage to the orchids. It's really the aphids that they protect and farm essentially. And the aphids really feed by piercing and sucking the sap of the orchids itself. And over time, left unchecked, they'll form massive colonies, with hundreds, if not thousands, on a plant. Another pest that also affects orchids are mites. And just like how for our pepper farmers or tomato farmers, etc., you have mites, and the damage that they do by piercing and feeding on the sap of the plant, causing wilting of the leaves. You'd have destruction of the buds themselves and the flowers. So you'd have abortion of flowers or even the buds due to that. And if with severe infestations left unchecked, the plant would eventually wilt and then die. Orchid farmers out there know also that slugs, especially slugs and snails actually, especially love orchids. And the destruction that a single slug or snail might wreak on an orchid plant in one night, you might have 6 or 7 beautiful, healthy leaves, and by the next morning, 2 of them have been completely destroyed. Now, snails themselves have shells, and the slugs don't have shells, but typically you would see them feeding on the leaves and flowers, and this would prevent the plant from being able to effectively carry out photosynthesis. and they may even eat the entire flowers and the leaves. Now, they're very active at night, so chances are you will not see slugs or snails actively feeding during the days. You might not even see them any at all, because what they'll do is take refuge, in under rocks or in vegetation during the days. So if it is that you notice that you've been having snail or slug attacks, search around your garden or around your farm plot if it is that you're doing commercial orchids for any of those kinds of places where you have rock formations or rocks piled up, decaying vegetative matter, or anywhere that is very cool and damp, because that is where the snails will stay during the day and then come out and feed at night. So even for very effective control of the snails and slugs, when you're treating, late evenings to night would be the best time, and also to find where it is that they're colonizing during the daytime period and treat that area as well. Now, in terms of our pest management products for the orchid midge, we're still, as a company, exploring all our product offerings to treat the orchid midge. And among the most effective products we have found so far would be our Caprid 20 SL, which we use at a rate of about 2.5 to 5 ml per 3.8 liters of water. An important thing to note with Caprid though is that in terms of its use rate, use the lower rate on young developing plants. So once you would have started to clone or develop your new plant, those younger plants that are still in that early growth phase, I would recommend going at a lower rate for them. And especially at that time too, you would not have any blossoming or flowers. So it's not like you really have to treat to ensure that you control the midge itself. In cure also has been found to be very effective at a rate of 2.5 to 5 mils per 3.8 liters of water. In the carb at 5 to 10 mils per 3.8 liters of water, and definite 2.5 EC at 5 to 10 mils per 3.8 liters of water. In terms of aphids, they are soft-bodied and pretty easy to control as well. So products like our Definite and our Caprid also provides effective control of aphids. Mealybugs also, Caprid 20 SL, and our Refas EC at 76 mils per 3.8 liters. And one of the good things about Refas is that it is one of our softer chemistries available. So even for a house plant that might have issues with the mealybugs or even aphids, Refas can be used, and you wouldn't have to worry about taking away your blossoming or flowering orchid from out of your house for an entire week or more. You can spray it today and have it back in the house by the next day. In terms of mites, our double combo, Nisaran and Cure, should give you effective control of mites. And with this, we can't stress it enough that we have gotten up to 60 days control of mites using Nisaran and Cure, not only for orchids, but in other crops. In terms of snails and slugs, our plant guard at a rate of 75 mils per 3.8 liters of water applied. If you're going to apply it with a spray can, we have farmers out there who we know actually mix plant guard with pig pellets, or even flour and cornmeal, and set it throughout their field. But definitely, if it is that you're not seeing them when they're coming in and you know where they're colonizing during the day, a quick knockdown with plant guard at 75 mils per 3.8 liters of water is a perfect treatment. Okay, in terms of diseases now, Cercospora leaf spot, and this is one that definitely many farmers or many growers out there have had experiences with Cercospora leaf spot. And you know, it is one of those issues that is very hard to keep at bay in whether it's your backyard or the commercial operations. Now, it's typically you'll see it start out as some yellow areas on the undersides of leaves, and then as the disease itself progresses, you see the it becomes more visible on the top of the leaf. So it starts with the underside and then it moves over to the top where it starts seeing it. And then what will happen is that the leaf itself, where the spot is, will start to turn brown or even black. And then it definitely spreads rapidly in wet, humid conditions. So at this time of the year where we're having increased rainfall, you know, you can see a greater level of spread of it. Or even if you're growing in, say for example, a nursery or a shade house, if it is very humid, you'll also tend to see an increase in your cercospora leaf spot issues. In terms of, there's another major issue as well, root rot. And for this one now, usually it is from the roots that you'll start to see the problem, you know, and your growing media might be the cause of it. But what you'll see is that the infected plants become stunted and wilted, and then you'll see some brown to black areas that may extend from the roots to the rhizomes itself. And then as the disease progresses and get increasingly worse because the plants now are not able to take up the nutrients and water as how it should, you'll see the leaves become twisted, wrinkled, and yellowish. You know, one of the things I always recommend to farmers is that if it is that your orchid, if you have it in a pot and you see this, you know you're watering effectively, and you're still seeing this happen where the leaves become twisted and wrinkled, what we recommend is that you actually pull the plant from the pot and check on your root system. Erwina is a bacterial disease now, and this one begins as a water-soaked greenish yellow to reddish brown lesions that on the leaves or even the pseudobulbs. Now, what you'll tend to note, and a quick thing that you can note, if it is fungal, you won't get the smell, but if it's bacterial, you're going to get a very foul smell. And what you see is that the lesions, they actually you'll see a liquid coming from where it is that you see the infection. So if you don't see that, you know, then probably it is a fungal issue that you have, not the bacterial issue. But the disease is most prevalent on plants that are stressed. And so a plant might be stressed because it's not getting enough water, not enough light, it's not getting the nutrients that it needs, etc. Or even a plant that is in active reproductive phases. So flowering, the plant has actually turned over most of what it would be using as food to the next generation, and then not be putting up enough nutrients to fight off the bacterial infection that it has. And then you would have chances for this disease to take hold. But you know, it's a very common problem though, in especially the phalaenopsis. And during this you can see during the long hot summer months. Now, in terms of treatments for the orchid diseases, we have for our Cercospora leaf spot, we have 3 products that may be used in rotation with each other. Topsin M at 5 to 10 grams per 3.8 liters of water. And one of the things you can make note of here is that for orchids, we tend to go with the lower recommended rates for each of the products. And this is because, as I said earlier, the orchids tend to be very delicate. So depending on the variety of orchid that you have growing, it will recommend do a test before just to ensure, because there are thousands of species of orchids out there, and you never know if yours might be the most delicate of variety of all, you know, versus something like dendrobium, which tends to be a bit more hardy in terms of how it tolerates the environmental and chemical things that it is exposed to. In terms of our Acrobat, 10 to 20 grams per 3.8 liters of water, and also our Zampro, which can be used at a rate of 10 mils per 3.8 liters of water. Blackleg, which is the same Erwina, Sulcox, OH, at 30 to 45 grams per 3.8 liters of water. One of the things to note as well is that Sulcox may cause flower or bud abortion, and this is because it is a copper-based fungicide. But one of the things that if I'm not sure anybody out there would see black Erwina affecting their orchids and it's about to die and not treat because it is flowering. So one of the things we also try to recommend is that you can do this as a preemptive treatment, because the Erwina is you would typically see it during the periods when you have higher than normal rainfall and increased humidity. You can actually treat ahead of time and then have the protection there, because the plant would already have, you'd have ensured that the plant already has that chemical used to help provide some amount of protection before you have your flowering, your spiking or your spray development. For root rot, the three products Zampro, Topsin, and Acrobat provide very, very, very good control of root problems, root fungal problems in your orchids and other plants. So any one of these products applied as a drench to the root zone of the plant will give you a pretty effective control right away. And even in the process of repotting your orchids, you could use any one of these products at that point in time to treat, to help provide the protection. Now, another major issue that a lot of farmers, a lot of growers will experience is sunburn. And the first time I saw this for myself, I was about 9 or 10 years old, and my mother asked me to put the orchids outside because we had rain in the morning, so that they could get some sun, but take them up after the rain stop if I see like the sun coming out. Well, end up sun coming out and I never take them up back. With about 3 to 4 hours of sun from about 11 to 1 o'clock, almost every single plant that I carried outside got sunburned. And what we saw was some white areas or even brown areas on the leaves, and they actually dried and turned black, just as I'm describing now. So it's not a serious problem in the sense that it can, it will, with one exposure, it will kill the plant, but prolonged exposure, it will kill the plant outright, in the fact that it will burn all leaves. But one of the things is that it also makes your orchids look pretty ugly. And the leaf damage themselves, if it is severe enough, it can lead to a secondary infection in the damaged area. So you might have fungal or bacterial diseases that might invade the plant from the area that has been damaged. All right, some a run through of some of our nutritional products for orchids. Earlier I mentioned how during different stages of the plant, we recommend that you use different products because at a different stage in the plant's development, it requires certain nutrients for the optimal growth at that stage. So I liken it to you giving a child, a baby, for example, yam and dumpling. You would never give a 6-month-old baby yam and dumpling to eat. You would give them something soft. So it's the same way for the orchid, giving them something for flowering at a stage when you need vegetative growth is a big no-no. So I've seen where growers have been feeding new plants that were developing from cuttings the same feed that they would give to the mature plants that are flowering. And what you see happen, the plant might start to flow, so you see that spray, you see them spiking, but you only get 1 or 2 flowers on it. And that's because the plant was not old enough, is not old enough to carry that flower or the spray and give you those long, beautiful sprays that we all want to see as orchid growers. So the recommendation is for young developing plants, products such as our Bio 20, Fortify, Grow, and in the later stages of development, just before you have your flowering, before you know that you'd have flowering onset. So, from your cutting to about 8 months old, 9 months old, you'd use like a rotation of the Bio 20, Fortify, and Grow, and then you start to introduce a cytokine, which would be the plant hormone that would trigger the plant into flowering and reproductive stages. One of the things like with farmers with the phalaenopsis is those plants with how they reproduce and even the dendrobiums and so the cytokine itself, the cytokine hormone itself actually will trigger them to actually start that reproductive stage, so you can actually start to get plants from them at that point in time. At flowering, to ensure that you have good healthy flowers, Microplex is key, as well as Calmax B. And our microplexes are a mixture of micronutrients, essential micronutrients needed by the plant to help you to get the proper bud development, longer sprays, and on the back end, big beautiful flowers. The Calmax B is rich in calcium with boron, which assists with the floral morphology, so you get the proper shape that the orchid blossoms should have. And our Nutrient Express actually helps to push, because it's very high in potassium. It's 44127, helps to push the greater levels of flowering from the plant, because it's what it is actually. It is a blossom booster. In terms of your on the reproductive side, so when you want to encourage the new development of plants from your your asexually reproduced orchids, your vandas and your dendrobiums, etc. Our Powergizer Ultra and our Green Stem have proven to be very effective in pushing the growth of those new plants, and also pushing the plant to actually do that kind of reproduction. Now, bud loss, and this is something that any orchid farmer would start crying their eyes out once you see your buds start to fall off for whatever reason. And this can be due to a number of reasons. one of the things is over or underwatering. So examine your growing media to ensure that you're not over underwatering your orchid plants. And then also, if the cultural practice is not enough to help ensure that your plant recovers from that stress quickly, you can use green stem along with Calmax B. In terms of pest attack, good sanitation, pest surveillance is essential. You know, if it is that you have an infected plant, separate it as quickly as possible from other healthy plants. And, you know, if it is that you have leaves that are infected, trim those leaves off as quickly as possible so that you don't have spreading of the disease issue, of the pest issue. But appropriate insecticides may be used. So one of a number of products that we have for like for mites, for scale insects, mealybugs, etc., along with cytokine and nutrient express. And what this will do is pretty much get your plant back into production quickly. Now, chemical fumes. A lot of growers don't think about this, but it is a major issue that can occur. You know, you place your orchids, and it's for those who actually even have their orchids at home in rooms. You know, you paint over your room, so you just put a fresh coat of paint on the wall, or in your nursery, you use black oil to prevent ants from coming onto your beds, or some other chemical. Some of these chemicals actually can affect the orchids and cause severe effects on them. One of the treatments that we recommend right there now would be green stem plus Calmax B. And the green stem would help the plant to cope with the stress issues, and Calmax B would then also prevent the flower abortion because of the high calcium. Um, ethylene, which is given off by fruits when they are ripening. So some things like tomatoes, banana and stuff like that, they give off a lot of that. So having those fruits, so you might have the fruits on your dining table and an orchid plant right next to them with a long spray with 30 odd flowers, blossoms, and you start to see them drop off rather quickly instead of lasting, say, a month or 2 months or 3 months, as the case may be. They start to abort pretty quickly. It might actually be that. And we recommend there that you can treat with our Calmax B for that issue. Okay, next issue would be humidity, and in this case specifically low humidity. You know, ensure that your orchids are in a well ventilated area and that you have good moisture levels within the plant to enable it to better tolerate the low humidity issues. But once again, our green stem with Bio 20 is a very good treatment that you can use for the plant during these kind of conditions. So if you see that happening, those two products will actually help you. In terms of disease infection, so one of the number of diseases we looked at a bit earlier, you know, definitely good sanitation and ensure that your growing media is clean. And so I would recommend that if it's not every 6 months, every year, at its least, that you ensure that you repot, change your growing media, and ensure that, you know, if there are weeds in the growing media, that you take them out as quickly as possible, because a lot of growers themselves, you might see a lot of different type of weeds in the growing media, and these weeds actually can help bring about some of the diseases that you might encounter. But in terms of treatments, Fortify and Calmax B And fortify, one of the good things about it is not only that it is high in phosphorus and potassium, but it contains phosphates and phosphites. And apart from as the nutrients itself, the phosphites act as a fungicide as well. So it actually helps to build your plant's immunity to fight off any kind of infection that it might come in contact with. Now, the last thing is a change in your growing location. So you have your orchid plants in your nursery outdoor, but you want to carry it into your house because you want everybody who comes over to visit you see how beautiful your orchids are looking. One of the things that we do recommend is that you move the orchids before the flowers have begun opening, and you avoid a drastic change in the environment from which you took them. So you don't want to take them from a place completely shaded where they're getting only 30% sunlight to where they're getting 100% sunlight overnight. You try to avoid that. You don't move them from somewhere where it's very hot and humid and put them somewhere where they're cool or cold, with vast differences in temperature. Because this actually can shut the plant and then cause the abortion of flowers. But in treating, I recommend that you can use green stem, Calmax B, as well as Fortify. And this is really just to ensure that you reduce the stress on the plant and help the plant to cope with all of the stress that it would be going on and moving from one location to another. And for the commercial growers out there, definitely if it is like you're going to be selling or transporting the orchids from your nursery, say in St. Mary, to outlet store in Kingston or in St. James, it would be very good if you could actually run this treatment with the Greenstem Calmax B and Fortify flower.
Nikki, we're not hearing you. Could you repeat what you say? I must apologize for that. We're having some technical difficulties. Can you just give me a few minutes?
Okay, now we're moving on to poinsettias. And it's the time of the year for poinsettias, Christmas and all. And these are we have the red colored poinsettias, but here in Jamaica is very popular ones. But you have multiple colors out there. And in terms of poinsettias, what we'll be doing is just a quick introduction, looking at basic poinsettia culture, pests and diseases or treatments, and the nutritional requirements. And then we can take questions from both orchid and poinsettia. So poinsettias are commercially important plants grown mainly for Christmas as decorations. We do have commercial farmers here in Jamaica, and they're sold mainly as whole plants in pots or large shrubs, and are even used in Christmas tree decorations. Some creative people have used plants stacked on one another, and made it into the shape of what would be a typical Christmas tree, as how you can picture it in your mind's eye. So specifically though, poinsettias bloom when the days get shorter. So this is actually time of year. So when you have less than 12 hours total daylight, you'll see poinsettias start to bloom. And the colorful flowers, quote unquote, of the poinsettias are actually leaves, actually modified leaves called bracts. Uh, Poinsettias grow well in moist soil and in moist soil conditions, and the temperatures typically between 65 and 70 degrees are ideal. So it's definitely a cooler time of the year for the best growth of your poinsettias. And after the Christmas season, don't throw your poinsettias out. They can be grown outdoors during the summer. You can repot or into a larger pot, like about 2 inches larger than the one that you'd have gotten the poinsettia in, or even plant it outdoor in your yard somewhere. But one of the key things right there is to ensure that the area that you choose for it will not get more than about 6 hours of sunlight, because it really is not a plant that likes full direct sunlight. They are not poisonous plants per se, but the sap itself, for persons with sensitive skin, may cause, rashes or a kind of burning sensation, dermatitis. Now, light is very critical in your poinsettia care, because those of us who have had poinsettias, you'd have noticed that the color change occurs mainly coming on to the winter period, and light plays an effect there. In terms of putting your poinsettia indoors, if you're going to have it indoor, a southeast or the east window would be the better one to place it there to receive, the early bright daylight. And then, for outdoor, as I mentioned earlier, 4 to 6 hours, but 6 hours is pretty optimal for the poinsettia plant. In terms of fertilizer requirements, uh, during the holiday period that you'd have had your poinsettia, so from about November to early January, you wouldn't really need to focus on fertilizing the plant per se. Mainly what you need is to give the plant adequate water during that period. The fertilizer application you would start to do once you see the new growth occurring. And one of the things is that the poinsettia during the winter itself, growth has pretty much slowed right down. So you wouldn't have any new growth, so that wouldn't be using up that much in terms of nutrients for you to need to replace it. But after you see the new growth starting, you can rotate Bio 20 along with our Fortify. And the good thing with both these products, you can use them both foliar and as a soil drench for very effective fertilizer application. And you mix them at about 10 mils per 3.8 liters of water respectively. And after the Christmas period and after the holiday period, you would water or feed
Dennis, we're not hearing you.
Yeah, not hearing.
Hold a minute. We're having some technical difficulties on Dennis' end. He's trying to log back on.
Hi, good afternoon. Hello.
Hi, good afternoon. Yeah.
My name is Cheryl Davis. I
What's your
came to
name?
the
What's your
I'm
name?
Cheryl Davis. I came to the presentation late because I didn't remember about it. Is there any place I can go to get the full presentation? Because I'm kind of more totally interested in the orchid part of it. Is there any place I can go to listen to the full presentation from beginning to end after it has ended?
Sure, it is on our YouTube page. So you can go to our YouTube at Chem Plant and watch it there.
At what? What's the
At
YouTube page?
Chem Plant. Chem Plant, the name of the company.
AGM.
AGCHEMPLANT. I'm going to put it in the chat.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
So in terms of water requirement, so moist. So water the plant with salt.
Dennis, you're breaking up badly. Can you shift position? Repeat that.
Better now?
Speak again.
Is it better now?
Yes, it's better. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So definitely what we recommend now is that once you have watered your plant, lift up your pot, feel how the pot feels, the weight. So once it is dried out and you feel it gets very light, then you know that instinctively you need to water. But if you even use your finger, like your index finger, and press the soil surface, you shouldn't see water coming up out of the soil media. What you want to do, it should feel moist, but not wet where you have the water coming out. A mistake a lot of persons make on receiving even poinsettias as a gift is not to remove the decorative foil from the outer pot before watering, and the water and leave it around it, but the foil itself traps moisture in the pot, and they actually start to get the fungal problems or the root rot issues, because the foil is there holding all the moisture in the bottom of the pot. One other thing also, ensure that your plant is in a pot that drains freely. So the pot should have holes that allow the excess moisture to drain through. And you don't allow the poinsettia pots to sit in excess water. because once again, the constant wetness will rot the plant roots. In terms of your transplanting, so you've had your Poinsettia until February, March of 2021. You look at early spring or even early summer to do the transplanting, and you use a pot that's about 2 to 4 inches bigger than the original pot, and then you can place it in an area that gets a reasonable amount of sun. As I said, about 6 hours of sun would be okay for the plant. In the pots, you can use soil mix with a good amount of organic matter, such as the ag chem plants potting grower mix, and this is available directly through ag chem. We have different options available in terms of your potting mixes that you can look at. In the garden itself, you can place it in, plant it out in your garden bed, but ensure that it's a well-drained area, so you don't want anywhere that is getting waterlogged the minute you have rain falling or the water settling in that area. And then once again, about 4 to 5 hours of sun. And then immediately after transplanting your poinsettia, ensure that you water it thoroughly. And this is to ensure that, okay, the new soil media and the plant is actually going to be able to get enough moisture. Once again, slugs and snails do affect poinsettias and will damage your leaves themselves, just as the same with orchids. We also have issues where pests such as aphids will affect your poinsettias if left unchecked. And it's pretty much the same chemical treatments as we did with our orchids. Definite and caprid for aphids. For mealybugs, you have caprid and refas. And then if you have any issues with say slugs and snails, once again, definitely our plant guard. Now, circus spore leaf spot also affects poinsettias, and for most plants that you might have growing commercially or in your backyard, for beauty, leaf spot issues may affect them, just a different type of leaf spot. But the typical signs would be the yellowing on the undersides of leaves that spread to the top sides, and then once you have wet, humid conditions, then you'll see the prevalence of the disease. Root rot, if it is that you overwater the plant and you start to see the plant stunted and wilting, the roots will start to die back to the stem, and the leaves will become wrinkled and yellow. Sunburn also affects poinsettias. So I've been stressing about 6 hours, no more than 6 hours, 4 to 6 hours is key. Leaving the poinsettia plant, especially at this time when it is, so to say, in bloom, out in direct sunlight, you'll actually see the leaves themselves. I think the entire plant pretty much will turn white or even brown based on the sunburn issues. In terms of the leaf spot, Topsin, Acrobat, and Zampro, once again, would be recommended. And root rot, for your root fungal issues, Zampro, Topsin, and Acrobat would be the recommended treatments. In terms of your nutrition products, in the development stages, cytokine, Solid Grow 45, Bio 20, flowering, similar to orchids, Microplex, Nutrient Express, and Calmax B, and the reproductive stages, Powergizer Ultra, and Greenstem. Okay, and that will be it for the presentation. Now, are there any questions? Oh, and we have a question for a giveaway. We'll be giving away some Triphmine, which is a fungicide that can be used in your orchid or your in your poinsettia production. You know, it's good for like your leaf spot issues if it is that you come down with that. And the excellent thing about tryptamine is that it's not a very harsh fungicide, so it will actually, you know, you don't have to worry about it having any serious negative phytotoxic effects on your orchids or your poinsettias. So I'll take your questions and then ask the question for the giveaway.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Miss Miller.
Mr. Lecky recommended that we can mix the green stem with Calmax B and Fortify for a few things, like when changing growing locations and so on. My question has to do with the flowering stage, of where we have, I think, 3 products: Microplex, Calmax B, and Nutrient Express. Do these have similar active ingredients, and can we be combining them, or similar to how we combine those others for changing locations?
Oh, okay. Thanks for the question. Yes, they can be combined together for 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 optimal results. Because one of the things is that these products themselves, what they'll do is complement each other in terms of the necessary nutrient for the plant based on what it is going through. So during the flowering stage, when you have your sprays, your flowers developing, the blossom booster, which would be the nutrient express, would give you the necessary potassium. The Calmax B would help with your floral morphology and ensure that your flowers hold onto your plant. And then the Microplex now would give the micronutrients that the plant would need because it's going through a reproductive phase in its development. And at that point in time, those nutrients would be very helpful to help the plant, you know, um, for optimal production, stave off, you know, bacterial or viral diseases, and keep the plant healthy.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I have another question while my fellow participants are considering their queries. In relation to plant guard for the slug and snail treatment, I don't know if I got the recommended dosage correct. You said 75 ml per gallon?
Yes, that is correct. 75 ml per gallon.
That's like six. That's how does that relate?
Tablespoon.
Transfer to tablespoons or teaspoons?
5
ml
tablespoons.
was a teaspoon.
So that's right. No.
5 tablespoons.
Yeah, 5 tablespoons.
5 tablespoons. Wow,
Yes.
that's using a lot at a time.
Yes, yes. For the foliar application to get the optimal results, that would be the rate. Because what you'll, and you know, something I didn't mention, but definitely I should have, is that using it with a sticker, an adjuvant such as our new film P would be excellent, because what you'll do is also have the residue of the product in the area that it was applied, so that even if it doesn't come in direct contact with the slugs and snails at that point in time, once they come out and enter the area, anywhere in the area that the spray was applied, they would come in contact with chemical, and then the chemical will be able to do its job more effectively. The use of a new film P, which is key, is that what it does is help the chemical to form a coating over the area, so it will last even longer. So using a product like new film P, you actually can extend the chemical life on the surface for as much as 14 days, versus a case where heavy rains would wash it off, or rains would wash it off within a matter of hours.
Okay. Does dishwashing liquid have the same effect?
Okay, so one of the things is that, you know, the dishwashing liquid, we don't recommend it for use in your on your plants. You know, if you want, if because the ingredients that are used to make the dishwashing liquids might vary from person to person. So, for example, our reefers is the active ingredient in it is potassium oleate, which is similar to soap. However, the formulation of it makes it safer for use to apply on the plant itself versus using uh, a name brand dishwashing liquid out there that might cause some phytotoxic effects to your orchids. And you have to remember too is that you know, the different varieties out there have different tolerance levels to multiple to the environmental and chemical factors around them. And it's something that we try to advise, you know, don't take any risks with the orchids. You know,
Yeah.
even some persons use like alcohol, like rubbing alcohol for scale insects or mealybugs, you know,
Mm-hmm.
has proven to be effective. However, you know, it's not all alcohol that can be used. It's really isopropyl alcohol, no more than about 70%.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, when in doing those kinds of recommendations, it has to be specific to the active ingredient that is in you know, the chemical or the product that you are using to try and treat for the problem.
Thank you, Mr. Lecky.
Lucky, you can go ahead and ask the question.
Okay, so the question is, in terms of your orchids and poinsettias, if it is that you have received it as a gift and you are placing it somewhere in your house, what orientation would be the ideal place in terms of the window orientation would be the ideal place to put the plants?
What do we do? Type it in the chat or answer?
You can type it in the chat. Anne-Marie Campbell as west window. Lecky. Sheila Miller as southeastern window.
All right, so we have the winner in Sheila Miller. The southeasterly window is the most optimal place. You know, the orientation east to southeast would be the ideal area, because what you want to do is minimize the amount of sunlight. You know, so the midday to afternoon sun on the westerly side would be a bit too intense, because the hottest time of the day, as we would experience it, would be between 1 and 3 p.m. All right, so the southeasterly window. So anybody who is giving away orchids and poinsettias as a gift, east to southeasterly window. Okay, Georgia, I'll turn over to you now. Thanks to our participants.
Thanks everyone for joining us again. I know this is our final Zoom meeting for 2020. I want to wish you all a Merry Christmas when it comes and a prosperous New Year. And we're looking forward to have a lot of sessions in 2021 on Zoom, on Facebook, on Instagram, and looking forward to see you. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Enjoy.
Mhm.
Thank you. What did you say?
Why did Mr. Ferguson just show up at our gate?